Okay. For those of you that are already in, make sure you please take your seats. I'm going to get going because I think we only have about 30 people, and by the time I get done, I believe we can get them in. Want to absolutely make sure that only voters are sitting in the seating area. If you're a non-voter, please go to the non-voting section. I need to speak up? Okay. I'll pretend that I'm yelling at the kids. He says, pretend I'm talking to him. Okay, I want to make sure everybody's in the correct seating. You're all wearing your mask. I am going to declare that a quorum is present because we have a zero quorum and I see more than no people in here with me. So the posting of the warrant, the town clerk has validated to me that the warrant has been posted in all the correct places that it needs to be posted. I will now ask you, Matt, do you have the flag up on the screen? I know you had it. Do we have it back? So we can pledge to the flag? Flag's gone. Oh, there's one in the back of the room. Guess I need my glasses. If you would all stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you would remain standing for a moment of silence, I ask that you stand and take a minute in the memory of Jack Stinson. Jack graduated from Wareham High School in 1957 and was a member of the Wareham High School Athletic Hall of Fame and worked as an English and social studies teacher at Wareham High and also coached the high school tennis team for many, many years before retiring. Sally Perry. Sally also graduated from Wareham High School. She worked in the Selectman's office for the town of Wareham for many, many years before retiring. Lance Howlett. Lance is another Wareham native and was a graduate of Wareham High School. Mr. Howlett was a health and education teacher at Wareham High and worked in the school system for 31 years. Mr. Howlett was a longtime softball, freshman basketball, and football coach in Wareham and was the original coach of the Wareham Tigers during their very first year. Kathy Gleason. Kathy's teaching career spanned over 20 years, pausing for a little while while she started her family. In the mid-90s, she returned to the classroom as a high school Spanish teacher and was a regular favorite among students for her caring, positive attitude and a genuine desire to see them all succeed. In addition, Kathy volunteered with many different organizations, including the Wareham Gatemen of Cape Cod Baseball League, mentoring the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults, assisting with the St. Patrick's chapter of the St. Vincent de Millay, and served as the former president and Friends of the Wareham Free Library, and most recently, a former president of the Wareham Cultural Council. I guess that's it. I thought I had a few more, but those, if you would keep them in your thoughts for the evening. So I'd like to introduce, you may take your seats. I would like to introduce, to my left, your right, Matt Underhill, who's our IT director, Michelle Bissonette, our town clerk, Bernie Pigeon, who's chairman of the finance committee. I'm Claire Smith. If you've never been to a town meeting, this is my 12th year. Town council, Attorney Bowen, town administrator Derek Sullivan, Judith Whiteside, chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Patrick Tropiano, Alan Slavin, and Jim Muniz, our selectmen. So I've gone through all the other rules. So we're here tonight to act on, as I said before in the opening, we have two warrant articles, but because they are married together, and you can't have one without the other, we are going to take them up as one article. So therefore, you will be able to speak to either one of them. Mr. Pigeon, may I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Moderator.
Oh, wait a minute. Nope. Sorry. This is what happens when you throw me off.
Okay, we'll try this again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are here tonight to discuss one item and only one item, and that is the town's proposed purchase of 54 acres of open space, which is essentially parkland. The property has been a self-sustaining golf course for over 60 years. There is no other similar property of this size and characteristics in the town of Wareham. This proposed purchase affords the town a one-time opportunity to control the property and ensure it is held in perpetuity as recreational space and as open space. It will be space that is protected but not restrictive. The use of community preservation funds does not affect the tax rate. You probably picked up a flyer outside this room which explains what CPC, which is the shortened form, funds can be used for. And there are only 4 categories. The purchase of this property falls under 2 of those categories: open space and recreation. The use of community preservation funds also requires that a conservation restriction be placed on the property. That restriction will forever preserve the property from the building of homes, condos, or solar arrays. It will ensure that the property remains a buffer for hurricane remediation, protecting the surrounding properties and marshes. As Joni Mitchell sang in her Big Yellow Taxi, and I'm not going to sing it, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Let's not take this property for granted. Let's ensure its preservation in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you. No applause. And the reason for that, I know I had to explain it at our last town meeting. If I let you applause for some, I also have to let the people that want to catcall. So that's how it happens. Mr. Pigeon, may I have the motion, please?
Yes, Madam Moderator.
The motion is going to be up on the screen for you to read along.
Yes, and let me explain. I removed my mask because it fogs my glasses up and I'll never read this. I'll make a motion. I move that the town appropriate $2,600,000 to acquire all land, buildings, and personal property of the Little Harbor Country Club, so called as more particularly described in a filing titled, quote, golf course purchase, unquote, in the office of the town clerk, by paren 1 transferring $1 million paren 1 million from undesignated Community Preservation Act funds under the category of open space and borrowing $101 million paren 1 million pursuant to GL Chapter 44 or any lawful authority, and to acknowledge the Community Preservation Committee's commitment to pay the debt service of $1 million paren 1 million borrowing in order to pay cost of acquiring all land, and paren 2 transferring $600,000 from certified free cash in order to pay cost of acquiring all buildings and personal property, including all costs, including necessary improvements, incidental and related thereto, and further that no Community Preservation Act funds be released until the following contingencies are met: the town receives the appraisal in the town's name, completes an environmental site assessment, completes a perimeter survey, and has an executed memorandum of understanding for a conservation restriction with a qualified organization.
Do I have a second? Have a second. Mr. Pigeon, to speak to the article? Both articles, actually.
Yes, madam. You ready for a vote, please? In Article 1, Finance Committee voted in approval 5-3-0. In Article 2, Finance Committee voted approval in 6-2-0.
The vote of the Board of Selectmen?
The vote of Selectmen was Article 1, 5-0-0, Article 2, 4-1-0.
Thank you. Mr. Pigeon, for your presentation to speak to the article?
Yes, Madam Moderator. We have a prepared presentation which will appear on the screen for the purchase of the Little Harbor Country Club property. The contents, we will go through the background, some objectives, financing and purchase, the conservation restriction, Little Harbor, the industry trends and environmental impact, how we would go about managing the course, and some alternative uses. Now the picture, please, Matt. Now the picture you see on the screen, that is what we are interested in this evening, purchasing that property. We are purchasing as an investment. Think of that as an investment which we will realize the benefits years to come after the golf course is no longer available. That's the entire objective we have this evening. And a little background, next slide, Matt, thank you. Consists of 54 acres. Was built in 1961. Long prior to that, it was a farm. The club was founded in 1964, which makes it around 60 years. And the property has always been a family-owned, managed facility. They put their hearts and souls into this process for at least 2 generations. Up at 5 in the morning, down at around 8 or 9 at night, closed only Thanksgiving and Christmas. They are open April 1 to December 31. We're one of the few golf courses in the area that allows that much golf. Now the current owners are looking to retire. There's a 3rd generation out there now, and their children have careers, they've established themselves, and don't have an interest in continuing on with the golf course. However, one of the agreements we've made, handshake agreement, is to try and pursue the operation of the course after we have purchased it. Our primary goal is to protect the open space. That's beautiful space that's there. If you've ever driven by it, right now you can say hello to flocks of geese down from Canada, but it's a beautiful area just to drive by. It abuts Little Harbor as well as some other conservation land. Secondary goal is the flexibility. We want to preserve it for recreation, not to take it out of the circulation where you can't even walk your dog. And the 3rd goal is hopefully to keep the operation of golf as long as it's self-sufficient. You are the final arbitrators whether that course continues to operation when it comes before you. Financing the purchase, it's $2.3 million for the Little Harbor Club. That's at about an appraised value. CPC has voted in favor of recommending to town meeting that the funding be utilized through CPC with $1 million in cash and the final $1 million being borrowing, very similar to what we've done in Tremont Dale. The additional $600 will be funded free cash, bond, grant, or other funding, and that's determined by the town administrator. $300,000 is the balance for the purchase of the property. The other $300 is covered costs. The septic tank system has failed Title V, and we've agreed, as many homeowners do, as we'll replace the system. There's also a number of issues, as you well know, when you transfer property, of fees and things that you need, and that'll be covered by those funds. The machinery and equipment has been appraised, but is nowhere part of this process. It is being, as I call it, gifted to us, period. Now, the next one, the conservation restriction, which is a very important one to know that that property, once we have purchased it, with the conservation restriction, will be restricted in perpetuity, forever. That means no one can go in and decide they want to buy it and change it to something else. It's restricted and it belongs to the town, period. It's a legal agreement, and it's required by state law. CPC cannot transfer any monies for this purpose until we have that restriction. We are currently in discussion with a third party, so that we are not going to be holding that restriction ourselves. The third party is. There are a few trusts out there who are interested in doing so, and we are discussing with one of them primarily right now, but it'll be definitely in the hands of the third party. Golf is not a part of that restriction. The Little Harbor Club financials, they've given us from 2005 to 2020 the average gross. This is a private party. They have no requirement to expose themselves to examination of all their financials until the property is purchased. And that's a little different from us. We always have all the information in front of us, and that is we respect their privacy to do so. They had a net income of 2021 of $81,000. That is very good. Of course, we all know there was COVID, those 2 years, and they increased everybody's recreational account. And as far as the Little Harbor and the summary of rounds they've played, I did some calculations for 2021. They played 22,921 rounds. I took the cheapest or the least expensive, which is $18 a round for Twilight, and that brought in for 22,000 rounds about $360,000. Golf is on the increase, but then again, as we all know, for the past 2 years, it of course is on the increase. The usual fees are the greens, the membership dues, private tournaments, golf court rental, pro shop. They have a cart there for food and beverage. They have a little restaurant, and they have beer and wine served. And that is quite a popular place, not only for the golfers, but there's some people who come in to make it a regular stop. Push carts in the house rental, it's possible to rent that out, the clubhouse. The golf industry revenue trends, please. The chart, as you see, it has gone up. There are some 15,000 clubs, golf courses in the United States. 400 of them are here in Massachusetts. The Cape has 15 communities. There are 14 golf courses. The environmental impact, of course, they use chemicals on their lawns and everything. The LACC, as it's called, has the annual soil testing. It's been reviewed by the University of Rhode Island, certified labs. It's never been found to use excessive net amounts, and they can measure that very easily as to how much they use. The town, we've had a list of all the chemicals used, and it's been reviewed by soil scientists. Nothing has been found unusual in using in the treatment of a golf course. The town has also submitted a list of chemicals to Green Seal. Green Seal is a group that kind of gives a seal of approval that if used properly, that is perfectly fine to be utilized. And they examine the public records because they must keep track. All these chemicals that are prepared or used on the golf course is done by license certification qualifications for each the owners, and they must keep meticulous records. And of course, when it is turned over to us, we will adhere to that same restrictions and good management. The town's going to outsource the data management. As far as managing a course, been there, done that. We didn't do it too well, and we don't think we're going to do it too well again. So many courses around the area are outsourced. They do management. There are several companies nationwide as well as here in New England. There are some, I count some 15 courses that are handled by management successfully. And we would put out an RFP and they would bid on the project. It protects the town. Some of the statements within all the RFPs that I've looked at say that if they don't make money, they are responsible for the shortfall. That is, they're responsible to buy a bond. If they estimate they're going to cost X number of dollars revenues, they don't make it, the bond picks up the shortfall, so they don't come to us. We do not fund any day-to-day operations. The golf course is probably, at best, capital outlay exclusively. We will not manage the course. If they come to us for tax dollars to subsidize their expenses, guess who makes the decision as whether or not the course goes on? You do, because we don't spend money unless you approve it. And so that's your final control over whether this course continues. Now, it's hard to add to that, but there's alternative uses for the property. I was checking with today. We have a bylaw that says controls the kind of property you're allowed to put solar on. Our bylaw allows solar on this property. There are 3 large parcels that are 10 acres or more, and that meets that criteria. You can put homes on it, you can put additional condos, etc. That is what we were trying to prevent by taking this out of the market and having that restriction placed on it. That's expensive. We start building homes on that because we have the general cost that adds to our budget. But what we would like to have happen on that, if the course should fail, start opening up for some recreation, have some picnicking. We're right next to the beach. I'm sure they would like to use a regular bathroom. There's a snack bar. Pick up a soda, sandwich on it, and when you're going to the beach. Have some picnic grounds, have a family in, have a picnic tables put out. We can have meetings up there in the clubhouse. It's an ideal place to enjoy. Just go for a walk. You can take your dog for a walk. Have Frisbee, anything of that nature. Recreation. For the town people, for us, it's a family beach. It's going to be a family recreation area. And that's about it, the best I can say. I can encourage you to consider this as an investment. It may not manifest itself this year or in 5 years, but it will manifest itself in an investment in our recreation for our community and friends and neighbors in Wareham. Thank you.
Okay, I will open up the floor for questions. I will ask that no more than 2 people at one time go to the microphone. So if you have any questions, your first 2, feel free to go to the microphones. It's in the center aisle. Might want to go the long way, but that's all right. Go ahead. Please, if you're at the microphone, please state your name. And remember that all questions are directed to the moderator.
My name is Donna Fox Rubin.
Need to speak real loud.
My name is Donna Fox Rubin. I reside on Highland Shores Drive in Wareham. And I'd like to hear what the opponents to this are thinking. I have no read on what their concerns are. And once I hear that, I'd like to also know if their concerns rise to the level where they feel we should not do this.
Yeah, can you speak? Do you have questions that you want answered? You have to speak a lot louder. Unfortunately, because this is a gym, it does have sound barriers to mute the sound, so you have to speak really loud if you have a question that needs to be answered.
I seek a better understanding of what the opponents to this program are thinking and what their concerns are. And once I know that, I'd like to know if their concerns rise to the level that they would vote against us making this purchase.
To answer the question, anyone? No. Yes, we don't have an answer. Jody?
Jody Smith, member of the Finance Committee. I'm also a retired general manager superintendent for a municipal golf course, so I do have some experience. This is open space being bought with a golf course on it. I'm aware of Little Harbor Golf Course, being in the business. It's a great golf course. It's a beautiful golf course. It serves a certain demographic group. More so, it's a nice level, flat course. However, as a FinCom member, we were not provided with a lot of information as far as the financials. And that was concerning. I was one of the 3 no votes because of the lack of financial information. I looked at the net income in the rounds. To say they were underwhelming would be an understatement. And I'm not using the COVID numbers for the last couple of years because every golf course in recreation area had great years. The equipment, at best, the equipment is questionable. And I was only provided a list of years, when it was purchased, what it was paid for, etc. The irrigation, I have no idea. The appraisal was done for the Audubon Society, which they did a great job. It's a great piece of property. However, I would have liked to see more information. The building, the pump houses, all the equipment. And as the chairman said, everybody's got to keep in mind, if they need any capital outlays right at the beginning, this body will make the final decision. So keep that in mind. This is not an open issue. That's my, as far as a FinCom member. As a resident voting from my heart, this is a great location. It's a beautiful piece of property. Residents will be able to enjoy this for many, many years, and the amount of property this close to the water is getting smaller and smaller. So as a FinCom member, and being practical, I voted against this. As a resident voting from my heart, I'm certainly going to support this, and we'll let the chips fall where they may as far as the golf course goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Scott Schaefer, and I reside in Precinct 5. I have a question for the board. If this vote does pass tonight, I'm wondering how, or do we decide whether to vote to keep it as a golf course, or if we look to the other alternatives?
To answer the question? Mr. Sullivan?
The decision would be based on the financial feasibility. If it looks like it would start costing the town money, because our plan is to put it into an enterprise fund, we can't do that at this vote because you can't create a new enterprise fund in a fiscal year where you've already set your tax rate. So we'd do that at the spring annual town meeting. However, if it's going to start costing money, especially big money, it looks like that we would start the process of shutting it down. It's, I don't know at this time whether that would require a vote of town meeting. I think you could stop the operations, but any of the contracts that we'd be doing would probably be on a 3, 4, or 5-year term with a, with the, not consultant, but the management company. So I think during that time, you'd start reviewing and seeing whether it continues to be feasible, what's coming down the pike, and whether you wanted to continue on with another contract.
May I add to that? That answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, please. And please keep in mind, only 2 up by the microphone at a time.
Annie, excuse me, Annie Hayes, Farmers Lane.
Can you speak a little louder?
Annie Hayes, Farmers Lane. Mr. Sullivan, moderator, could I ask a question and not have it my comment time, please? From the last response?
Can you repeat that? It's very muffled, so you're going to have to speak really loud and...
I didn't understand what Derek said. I thought the answer to the young man's question was that one option was for the town to outright buy the property, the golf course, always owned by the town. The other was with a conservation restriction, that if the golf course failed, it would continue in perpetuity to be open space for the town of Wareham's residents. Is that correct? Okay. Maybe
Yes.
That's correct, yes.
everybody, the enterprise fund threw me, I guess. When I think of open space, I think of trails and natural habitat, wildlife. And the difference with this is that the open space has an admission business, meaning that you can't go on this space without money. And I would like to make sure that's correct. You have to be a member, not necessarily a member, but you have to pay. And by my account of the fees, if I, a non-golfer, without clubs, without, I don't know if you have to wear shoes, I was just bowling, but the cart, without the cart, it would be almost $50, and also with the price of gas out there, it would be a little bit more. So tell me
30 seconds.
Tell me if I'm wrong on that, please.
Madam,
Answer the question.
Madam Moderator, because I kind of lost the sound at the end. But yes, who's ever holding the CR, the ones we've been speaking to are looking to creating trails around the outside that are not as intrusive to the golf game. So no, it would not be completely shut off to everyone.
I had heard that there wouldn't be trails at a meeting because of the insurance for the golf course, and that there really aren't viable trails that wouldn't be within the reach of a golf ball.
I can answer that.
Time?
Madam
Answer the
Moderator?
question.
Madam Moderator, when you negotiate the conservation restriction, it is not cut and dry, and it is not black and white. You can identify certain areas that you allow certain activities to occur. And then, so it covers the whole area. The restriction, however, would be not be in effect until after the golf course demise. Because with the golf course, you have very specific insurance also that covers the entire course within its limits. So you couldn't very well have, as you say, a walking trail going through a golf course while the golf is still an active pursuit on that area. But it's all negotiable within the holder of the restriction.
Bernie? Mrs. Whiteside?
Yeah, if I could add, yeah. There would possibly be walking trails around the perimeter of the course, and in the wooded areas, this is terrible, sorry, and in the wooded areas that are not directly in the line of fire, okay? So that's the concept right now. When golf is being played, you and I really don't want to be out there walking because we don't know which way the little white ball is going to go. But the concept is clearly to have the community be able to use the property. Does that?
I thought those two contradicted. I thought Mr. Pigeon was saying you can't have insurance when there are going to be golf balls flying, and now you're saying it's possible to have safe trails for the public to use at all times?
Not on the fairways. They would be behind, they would be in the woods. Mm-hmm. Okay, is that a better way of putting it?
Yeah, so,
okay.
So if this happened with the CR and the golf course.
Okay, your time was up, so you need to wrap it up.
So starting right away, there could be peripheral trails and golf course at the same time under a conservation restriction, correct?
I believe that the answer to that is yes.
Next, please.
He can't go back.
Good evening. My name is Jody Santagate. I'm just looking for some clarification. I'm currently the COA appointee for the steering committee. We're doing a feasibility study to see if the Deacon's School is feasible as a community center, to move the COA over there, and a bunch of other things. To take away from a bit of what I just heard Mr. Sullivan say is, if we get this going and approve it, and then things don't go the way that they hope they go, we will begin to shut it down. Why are you asking us to take a gamble with $2.5 million? Why aren't we doing a feasibility study on this before we buy it, when you've asked us to do a study to show you that the Deacon's School is a good place for a community center? I'm just confused. It just kind of seems like what you've asked us to do, you're not doing yourself.
To answer the question, if anybody, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, so the feasibility study was an agreement with the group that was going forward with DECUS. Also, we are buying 54 acres of land. So the plan was for DECUS to originally to sell the 17 acres. There's an alternative thought for that. So a feasibility to see what the costs are. to also see what potentially some other uses may be and some alternatives. Right now, we have a 54 acres of land near the ocean, a very unique situation, which also happens to have a golf course on it, which could return revenues and cover itself. If it's going to be a cost to the town, that's when you shut it down, because you would not want the cost to the town. So the alternative, the DECIS, is there is going to be a cost to the town. How much is that cost going to be? So you're kind of going from two opposite spectrums. And it's not I don't think it's an us versus them. I think it's everybody working together.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to speak on that? You keep saying if. To me, when I hear the word if, that doesn't mean this is a guarantee that it's going to pan out the way you guys describe it. It's a no vote for me. Thank you.
Madam Moderator, I wouldn't guarantee the sun will rise tomorrow. That's why you say if.
Thank you. Next at the microphone, please.
Leslie Edwards Davis, Precinct 1. Thank you, Madam Moderator. My concern is the ongoing responsibility of the town for capital expenditures. I'm all for open space, I'm all for recreation, but under this proposal, we are responsible for capital expenditures. And if you look at the contracts that other Massachusetts towns have with management companies for their golf courses, there is a clearly delineated town responsibility over and above a very small amount for capital expenditures. Usually it's between $2,500 and $10,000, and then anything else will be our responsibility. I don't see anything in writing, and it's certainly not in these sample contracts, that says that we have to go back to town meeting to vote on each of those expenses. That means we're going to pay for them. And everyone says it's going to come out of the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund only gets funded if the golf course is successful and makes money over and above a certain amount, which we also don't know what that amount will be because it hasn't been given to us. So if this thing is wildly profitable, great. We'll buy an irrigation system. If it's not, the current irrigation system has parts that are 48 years old, 42 years old, 32 years old, and an irrigation system costs between $500,000 and $1 million. So if you're ready for that potentiality, vote yes. If you're not, I think we ask a lot more questions about this. Thank you.
Madam Moderator, to answer the question,
To answer
our
the
town
question,
bylaws require capital to come before town meeting. So we cannot purchase capital items without town meeting's approval. So there's nothing that an agreement requires. It's our own bylaws that require that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Pappalardo, Precinct 5. I'm also president of the Wareham Land Trust, and I am not a golfer. I rise to ask you to vote yes for purchasing Little Harbor Country Club with Community Preservation Act funds. My interest in purchasing Little Harbor Country Club is for preserving this property as open space and recreation forever. Golf for now, open space forever. The use of Community Preservation Act funds mandates that a conservation restriction be placed on this property. The restriction is a legally binding agreement between the town, which is the property owner, and a conservation organization that would be the CR holder. The golf course can continue to operate, being run by a professional golf course management company, not the town. If and when golf ceases to be profitable at Little Harbor Country Club or sea level rise encompasses much of the golf course, golf would end. The property would then become open space and recreation under the terms of the conservation restriction. Protecting these 54 acres from development allows for continued public access, the potential for future walking trails, all persons accessible trails. It benefits the quality of the bay, allows for salt marsh migration, flood control, protects existing wetlands and forests, and maintains wildlife corridors and natural habitats. Not protecting these 54 acres from development will lead to further degradation of the bay, wetlands, and salt marsh while destroying wildlife habitat and forests. These lands would also then be private and not accessible. I urge you to vote yes to purchase Little Harbor Country Club. And Madam Moderator, I would ask, she'll wait her turn, but if Elise Leduc Fleming, the Executive Director of the Land Trust, would also be allowed to speak tonight.
I'm going to, those of you who would like to hear from the Director of the Wareham Land Trust, who is well-schooled in conservation restrictions, I can bend a little bit only because I think that is of major importance to this body. So all of those who would like to allow the Director of the Land Trust, who has a lot of knowledge, it's overwhelming, yes. Could we please have the Director of the Wareham Land Trust to speak to conservation restriction only and nothing more?
That's not me.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Elise Leduc Fleming, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wareham Land Trust. And I urge you all to vote yes to approve the town's purchase of the Little Harbor Country Club using CPA funds. This proposal is, admittedly, a little unconventional, but purchasing 54 acres with CPA funds is a wonderfully unique conservation opportunity. Placing a conservation restriction on this property, which CPA funding requires, would permanently protect this land from future development. And placing a conservation restriction on a golf course, while uncommon, is not new. Numerous Massachusetts communities, including Marion, Falmouth, and Stowe, have done so. Even while this property is actively used for golf, there are numerous conservation values that exist that a conservation restriction would help protect. I'll share just two of them with you tonight in detail. The first is ensuring that this property remains as open space will protect the water quality of the aquifer below this land as well as the adjacent estuary. And the addition of acres of impervious surface and septic systems that would be associated with development of this land, were it not protected by a conservation restriction, would create additional threats to the water quality of this area. And secondly, more than half of the Little Harbor Country Club property is already within a flood zone. Based on the recent climate change flood vulnerability analysis done for Wareham, more than 30% of the homes in the Great Neck area are already vulnerable to flooding. Protecting this land from future development avoids dozens of new buildings constructed in harm's way and allows the land to continue serving as flood storage and as natural storm buffer to the neighboring residential areas. These conservation values will be lost if the town does not purchase the Little Harbor Country Club. I hope that you'll agree that this property, these 54 acres of open space, are so much more than just a golf course, and vote yes. And I would be happy to answer any questions about conservation restrictions specifically, but I'll step aside to let the residents speak as well.
Thank you, appreciate that. Next.
Madam Moderator, Kevin Costa, Precinct 1. Who doesn't love open space? But my question is, with all due respect to, through you, Mrs. Moderator, to the panel, I don't believe, the gut feeling I have is that nobody's ever going to want this golf course to go away. So we're going to continue to fund this golf course in perpetuity. I have nothing against golf, but I just get that feeling in 5 years we're going to be here. Because we're talking if, ands, buts, and maybes, so I think I can talk in if, ands, buts, and maybes. As long as the golf course is there, because nobody's going to want the golf course to disappear. Secondly, I'd like to know, if this doesn't go through, and I know you folks know this because you talk to one another and you talk to other entities, and is Buzzards Bay Coalition still interested in this? Is the Audubon still interested in this? Is it because the owners will not sell to anybody who won't leave the golf course alone? Is that what the holdup here is? Is that what stopped other entities from purchasing it? I put this to I believe whoever through you, Mrs. Moderator, on the board would know the answer to these questions.
Mr. Titlebaum, do you wish to answer?
I stood to speak, not answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Mrs. Whiteside, to answer the question?
I can answer the second part of your question, sir. Well, actually, I can answer the first part. The running or managing of the golf course would be put out on a request for proposals, and the management company would bid to run the course. Typically, a contract is between 3 and 5 years, okay? So during that 3 to 5 years, the course either makes money for the management company or it doesn't. We already have had one company, management company, tour the course, and I was not present because it would not have been proper for me to be present, but that company did indicate an interest in knowing when we might post the request for proposals for management of the course. In other words, that company saw an opportunity. The second part of your question, I think, is if it doesn't make it as a golf course, then it becomes what it already is, which is parkland and open space. I probably forgot your second part of the question. If you want to fire it at me again, you know, senior moments, try it again. If we don't buy it, what happens? Oh, if we don't buy it, what happens? Okay. The owners have had an opportunity to sell the property to Massachusetts Audubon. That deal fell through. The Massachusetts Audubon model is to take property and immediately turn it back to nature, okay? If you're familiar with the Sacred Heart Seminary property, that is an example of the, I'll call it Audubon model. The owners have consistently stated that they wanted to sell to somebody who would continue the golf. They have managed the course, they or their predecessors, the family, for 60 years. So they have 60 years invested in a community golf course. It's a par 56 or 52. A larger course is a par 72. It's something that somebody like me, who's old and has a new hip, can play and enjoy. My kids learned how to play on that course. Many people who went to Wareham High School were on the golf team. They've gone on to actually manage golf courses. It has been a generator of jobs and opportunities for the community. I think that might answer your question.
And I agree that nostalgia is good, and we can look back and say all these wonderful things happened at this golf course. But I'm also old, and I've learned over the years that when I think with my heart, all I get is heartburn.
Time. Okay, the gentleman behind you, you were up before. You do have a little bit of time, but I'm going to ask you to wait till everybody else has spoken, please, so that we give everybody their chance.
I used about 20 seconds of my time. I still have over a minute left. I just want to make one more statement, my final statement.
I want you to wait till the end so that everybody has their chance.
Will you let me know when the end is?
I will.
Okay.
Mr. Titlebaum.
No, you've got 3 people who are ahead of me.
Okay. Next.
Thank you. I know I'm short, but not that short. Angela Dunham, Precinct 3. this is like deja vu for me and my husband, because we lived on a golf course for 26 years. And it did start to wane in popularity, as things do, come and go. And as time went by, developers came in and they were planning on putting up townhouses behind the homes. The people in the neighborhood were able to rally around and get someone to come in and invest in the golf course. And they hired a management company for the golf club itself, a restaurant that was highly successful. In any case, it turned around and it saved the development from having those townhouses come in with when unwanted density in the neighborhood. In any case, it's not just for golfers. For older people like myself, for example, I have played there several times for fundraisers, tournaments. I end up being the comic relief for the team, but nonetheless, the Wareham Historical Society being one of many, many groups in town that have come forward and used it as a fundraising opportunity for scholarships and so on. And I see this as a win-win for the town all around, for all age opportunities, especially where there are plans to put a walking trail around the perimeter
30 seconds.
of the golf course. So I stand here to strongly support the passage of this article, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
How you doing? My name is Achilles Arujo. I live in Onset. Thank you. There are two sides to Wareham. We live in Onset. Thank you very much. Wareham Ave, it's a slum, okay? I hear about open space, awesome. I love open space. I love walking. I don't have a dog, but I love all of this stuff. We live in a slum in Onset. My taxpayer money is going to be funding this thing. Take a ride on Wareham Avenue. At night, I wouldn't recommend it. It's dark, scary, okay? My family have owned that house. It's actually on the 1885 census. One of two houses that were there. Since 1920, we've owned it in our family. It's a disgrace to be in Onset, period. So I love the open space. I love the conversation. My taxpayer money, I don't want it there, unless you do something about Onset. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please. And again, I only want two people standing in line at the microphone, so please keep that in mind. Ma'am?
My name is Linda Rinta, Precinct 5. My grandfather was Dick Bowler. If you'll indulge me in just a little bit of sentimentality, before this was a golf course, it was his farm. He farmed the property from 1949 until he built the golf course in 1963. If you're of a certain age, you might remember the old red farm. My grandparents raised Angus deer, sheep, and chickens. They grew sweet corn, vegetables, strawberries, and raspberries that they sold at the stand in front of the big red barn. After farming back-to-back through two back-to-back hurricanes in 1954, they gave up livestock. In Hurricane Dawn in 1960, my brothers, my mother, and I lived in a small cottage on Lookout Lane. We were evacuated to my grandparents' farmhouse and watched the storm surge at high tide break through the connecting salt marsh and come up the cornfields to the farm stand. Those cornfields are now fairways. When the storm abated, we returned to our little house, which was spared flooding thanks to the surge protection of those farm fields. It was the following year that my grandfather decided that farming was too risky for an old man, and together with his neighbors, decided to build the golf course with a stated purpose to hold it in open space and provide instead for outdoor recreation. And his neighbors were his original partners and investors. He ran the golf course until he was 80 years old and sold it to another group of neighbors.
30 seconds.
The golf course has paid for its own operation and maintenance, maintaining its open space and surge protection for over 59 years. It has proven its ability to endow its own maintenance. What other town acquisition has done that? What Qualifying purchase could do that. It provides jobs and opportunities. What other qualifying land acquisition can do that? It has functioned as a surge protector for Great Neck Peninsula. This is the best qualifying purchase the town could make. I urge you to vote to buy. And to those who say it's an elitist activity is ridiculous. This is a small par 3 course. Good for kids, good for old ladies, good for all, people of all ages and all talents. And it gives us an opportunity to do a lifetime sport for the rest of people's lives. So I urge you to buy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, next. Mr. Teitelbaum.
Hi, thank you. Peter Teitelbaum, Precinct 3. I had initially expressed reservations during a Board of Selectmen meeting, or 3 probably, about the wisdom of combining preservation with profit, because we're buying a for-profit business here to run on land that we're trying to preserve, and sometimes those marriages are uncomfortable and don't end well. Since that time, there's been a lot of communication with potential restriction holders, and we know who they are in this town. We know the coalition, Buzzards Bay Coalition, holds a lot of restrictions. We know the Wareham Land Trust holds a lot of restrictions. And as a result of some of the things I was sort of hearing in terms of what those organizations might be willing to do to accommodate what could happen after the golf course, eventually, if it does go away, I was heartened to realize that it was not the Audubon model. Again, the Audubon model is to buy up woods and keep them as woods, and that's great. I use the woods in this town, and I wish more people would, because I don't see a lot of people out in them, and we do have some wonderful recreation areas. But this is a different form of recreation, and it's in a different location than some of our woods. This is near the water, so it lends itself to walking trails. It lends itself to things like a horseshoe court. If it ceases to be a golf course, it should be used for community use. And so I'm glad the Audubon purchase fell through, because not only would it have been a restrictive use of the land going forward, but it also would have meant that the people in the neighborhood would have had to watch nature fill in over the course of 20 years. Now, some people might think that's wonderful, but when you walk on some of our areas and you look at the bogs as they're regenerating, they're not the most attractive thing to look at. So I can understand why it was good that the Audubon backed away. I know there's concerns about operational costs, but again, when you hire a firm to do it, they bear those costs. Capital costs, I suppose it's possible that you could have some equipment break. There was a reference earlier about 48-year-old pipes. Just because they're old doesn't mean they don't work. I mean, I'm 62, my plumbing still works fine. So, I would support the purchase. Again, I was kind of a little bit reluctant coming to the table on the funding, but I'm okay with it, and I would urge the body to vote yes.
Thank you. Next.
Philip Barry, Precinct 1. I am a golfer. I'm also blue collar and a beer drinker. So I'm not an elitist at all. I've enjoyed Little Harbor. I've played Little Marion, played Bay Point. Marion is similar to Little Harbor in so much as that property, a bunch of homeowners around the outside edge invested in it and kept it as open space so that nothing could ever be built on, and it's a golf course. That's what I envision with what's going to happen with Little Harbor. If you look at Bay Point, that was sold to a private concern, and if anybody's driven through there, there are an awful lot of buildings going up. So I guess my question is, how is the Little Harbor property actually zoned if we were to lose it and weren't able to keep it as open space and it was sold to a private concern?
To answer the question, Mr. Teitelbaum?
Yeah, it's in the R60 zone, which is 60,000 square feet, which is roughly 1 1/3 acres. So that's the current zoning. To get to the question of what can be built there, understand that people can come up with proposals and get variances and things of that nature. So zoning is where you start. It's not necessarily where you end up when somebody goes to develop a property. I just want that to be clear.
So that means potentially up to 30 to 50 houses could be built there if we didn't keep it as open space.
Thank you. Next.
First of all, point of personal privilege, could we please put the warrant article up? Because it's totally different from what we have and what we've looked at. Instead of looking at the open space, I think we all know how beautiful the property is.
What's that? The motion, you want to see the motion up on the screen?
Please,
Yes.
thank you.
Mr. Underhill, could you bring that motion up on the screen? Keep in mind that motions are not necessarily what you see in the warrant. When a warrant article is written, it is generally written so it's pretty broad, and that's because you want to be able to, when you make your motion, be able to make that final motion such that you're within the scope of that original warrant article. And that's why I caution you at the beginning of the meeting to make sure you pay attention to the motion before you. It is not exactly as what may be in your warrant. And that's to give a broad base so that we can talk about it, and then you come down to your final motion on the floor, and that's what you vote on this evening. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, it was a point of personal privilege first. Thank you. Brenda Ekstrom, Precinct 2. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I apologize for my voice. A little better, maybe. Could I know what find out what the CPC vote was on this?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? Maybe just take your mask down for a second.
Could I find out what the CPC vote was on this, or if they had one?
Okay. Joan's going to speak to it.
Joan Kinneberg, Community Preservation Committee.
You speak really loud, Mrs.
Joan Kinneberg, Community Preservation Committee. The Community Preservation Committee voted twice on this. The first time we voted, it was a unanimous vote because the contingencies were going to be required by tonight's meeting. The second time we voted, Mr. Sullivan asked that the contingencies be delayed until closing. And so that vote was not unanimous. It was 4-2-0 to delay the contingencies. So as it stands now, the contingencies must be met by closing in order for CPA funds to be released. If they are not all met by closing, then CPA funds will not be available to pay for the property purchase.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to know if the Board of Selectmen or the Finance Committee, if you looked at the deed that we're buying or the deeds that we're buying, because there are restrictions and allotments and conveyances on those deeds that will carry with the deed. Like there's somebody who gets their pipeline for their water for their house on the deed. There's another one that allows people to pass and repass on the property to
30 seconds.
To get water. So I think there's that. And then the most important thing, we keep talking about money and how this is going to be a profitable thing. Well, under Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 12, Clause B, the town has to own and manage it. We can't put it out to a management company. That's for town employees. So.
Time.
It always is.
Mr. Slavin, do you care to answer that question?
I'm sure our town council can answer that. And after he answers that, I'd like to move the question.
If he chooses to.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to the previous speakers. The town may put out a management contract for the operation of a golf course. It's frequently done, and Chapter 44B does not prohibit it.
Thank you. Next.
Marsha Campbell, Precinct 1. I came in here totally on nostalgia.
I've been here since 1972, and I grew up on that golf course with my grandparents. I walked by there last summer and had a conversation with the maintenance man. He heard my maiden name, and not only did he know my grandparents, but he remembered me running around, and they haven't been there since 1981. So I'm huge, panic attack about it. But then I kept an open mind, and you may have answered this, but forgive me because I can't really hear, but the money is being spent for that. But I also know there's irrigation issues and septic issues. So if those cop out, are you just dumping it? Or who's going to pay for that? What society is going to pay for that? That's my one question. And then my second question is, I'm a fighter for my stuff. And my stuff is like sidewalks, which I've written all my letters and I got a couple answers back. And they all talk about the money. There's no money, there's no money, there's no money. You found the money. Now I'm all for this, saving this, but we need to spread the love. And just because the sidewalks are good for everybody. And can you answer the question? So if the septic goes out, is that when we dump it?
To answer the question only?
Yeah.
Mrs. Whiteside?
Yep, thank you. The septic system repair and replacement. Somebody else, turn that on. Yeah. The repair of the septic system is approximately $50,000. It's part of the purchase and sale agreement. The town has agreed to replace it. The second part of your question is we really can't talk about that. I hear you. I get it. We have potholes and we have lights that don't work and all that other stuff. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Community Preservation Act money can only be used for historic preservation, affordable housing, open space, or recreation. It cannot be used for snow plowing. We've got a lot of that. Cannot be used for hiring extra policemen. It cannot be used for any other purpose. That's the law.
Thank you.
But I agree with you. There are lots of things that need to be fixed. I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Mr. Slavin?
Madam Moderator, I'd like to move the question.
I did. I promised that I would give the gentleman that had more time the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, she did.
Is he next? Am I next?
Nope, I'm going to let the gentleman that I had promised. We have a motion on the floor to move the question. I'm going to let him speak, and then I'm going to talk about the motion on the floor.
Can you hear me? Yes. So I'm of the opinion that a golf course is counterintuitive to conservation goals. Golf courses are very bad for the environment. An 18-hole course, on average, will use 59 million gallons of water to maintain the turf. They've already acknowledged that we are using pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers on the field. None of this will meet our conservation goals. What we should be doing is focusing on restoring this land onto natural wilderness, as Mass Audubon suggested, and I do not think that this will meet our conservation goals. People want a golf course. I understand the sentiment. You guys have golfed there for many years. I'm a young person. I'm thinking long-term, and this is not the right way to do it. I'm voting no.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to move the question. This does require a 2/3 vote. Will the tellers please come forward? I need my tellers to come to the front. Okay, if this motion passes, all discussions stop, and we take a vote on what's before us. So there will be no more discussion. Where's my other tellers for this side? I need two. You all set? So what we're going to be voting on is to move the question. It requires a 2/3 vote, which means there will be no further discussion, and we will vote and make a decision on the article itself. So if you want to keep talking, then you vote no. If you're all done hearing from everyone and no more discussion, then you would vote yes. All those in favor of moving the question and no more discussion, please hold your cards up high.
I guess that worked.
Oh, there were two cards.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Pretty much.
You know, you beat them to death, and after a while, it's just not worth it. Like this girl's gonna handle it. It's aggravating, just almost the system. I blame the schools.
Well, first the plane is done.
There's ways that she could come before us.
She didn't have love. Want to see it?
I'm going to have you. I think you're done now. John, on my left? On my left is 154. On my right? 167. 81. The vote is 302. All those opposed, please raise your cards.
Quite count them there.
Yeah.
Is that Jack in front of us?
You know why that? I think he's just being a wise ass.
I'm gonna stop and say hello to everybody.
Oh, come on.
Sandy and I are good friends, but I can't believe it.
402.
Not many of them.
From Berger's wife, already figured out he's got 5 to 7 friends that buy the property. Develop it. And develop it that they want. For that kind of money, everybody would buy it. My friend
John?
Girl's house on Winship, which isn't that big, you got 2.2.
On my left, 10. 8 on my right. 11. 11. The vote is 402 in the positive and 29 in the negative. The motion carries. We now will end all debate. I will now call for a vote on the motion on the floor before you. Again, we're taking them both together as one motion. All those in favor, this requires a 2/3 vote, so we will take a counted vote. We don't ever want any question on this. All those in favor, please raise your cards to be counted. Could have done it 2/3 non-counted.
About time we won one. About time. Danny Warren got his stuff today too. It was a good day. Danny Warren got all his stuff today too.
Yeah, I know. I forwarded that today. Steve sent back and said they already forwarded it, so that's good.
They put a lot of time and work into getting it done.
Planning board get to it tonight?
Yep.
Good, 'cause they were meeting like 4 or something.
4 to 6.
Yeah, okay, good.
I got Ken to put it back on the agenda for tonight. And Sandy got her stuff for conservation. They're actually starting to work on it right now.
Did Keating ever get back to you on delaying the updated zone cutoff date?
We're working on it. Yeah. I had Jack with his aide come, actually came to town hall a couple days ago. We're working on a bunch of things now.
So you had a chance to drill into him a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, set up this program and, you know, the virus hits and knocks everything askew for 2 years.
What happened was in New Bedford, someone had a similar situation. Keating stepped in and got it taken care of. So Keating has already been...
So he's already been down there?
Well, actually, Danny's talked to Keating's office. They've already talked to him. So he's fine. The next thing is the coalition.
Ladies and gentlemen, please don't walk out right at the moment in the middle of a vote. I don't want any questions about this whatsoever.
We got this huge project with 5 communities, plus the Maritime Academy. We got an infrastructure bill coming down the road. I gotta get the information in tomorrow. Try that.
Let's get in line for some of this. We're paying for it, or our grandchildren will be, but I mean...
I've been thinking on this new technology car.
Huh?
Ladies and gentlemen, please stop where you are and don't leave. We're in the middle of a vote. On my left, 163, 163. On my right. 165. On my right, 165. 95. All those opposed, please raise your cards. On my left? 13, 1, 3. On my right? 13? 1, 5. 15.
606.
The count is 423 in the affirmative, 34 in the negative. The motion passes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and thank you for your patience. I know these can be very difficult.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, we're buying.